Hello, my name is Sarah Crossan and I'm the author of Toffee, which has been nominated for a KPMG Children's Books Ireland Award. And I'm really pleased to be able to answer some of your questions about the book. The inspiration for the story came from the name, really. I had this idea of creating a character called Toffee, and I wondered, what would this girl be like? Well, she would be hard and she would be sweet and she might break your teeth. And so from that idea, I created this whole world that Toffee lived in. But then I needed Toffee to have a friend, and I wanted to choose a sort of unusual friend. And so that was why I created Marla. And Marla is a woman suffering with dementia. And so I thought this might be a really interesting way to develop a friendship, because Marla might not remember that she's an older woman. And how would that work? What would that look like if a teenager and a woman who doesn't know that she's not a teenager become friends? All the fun things that they could do for the first time together, all the advice that the older woman could give the young girl, and all the advice that the young girl could give to the older woman. Is there a way that even though they are so far apart in ages, they could somehow be equals? And that was really what I tried to do with the book. I don't know anybody who is living with dementia, but I have lots of friends who are either living with someone who has dementia or have lived with someone who has dementia or are simply caring for that person. And that was a really important part of my research. And what I discovered was that no matter who it is that's living with dementia, they're all having different experiences. All the experiences are completely unique. So it's quite an unpredictable disease. But a lot of the disease means that the person does forget things, and some parts of that can be quite funny for the people living with that person and also for that person themselves. And equally, it can be quite sad and upsetting for the person with dementia to forget, and for the people around them to experience that forgetting, because not only do people with dementia forget things like words or where certain items are kept in their houses, but they can forget the names of people who are very, very close to them, like their children or their grandchildren, and also just completely forget those people. And so it can be a disease that really unites families, but it can also be a disease that's pretty devastating for those families. I did a lot of research as well in terms of reading and documentaries, watching those, and that's a really important part of my work always, is that I try to research as much as is possible so that I'm as authentic as I can be when it comes to dealing with an issue. And I really hope I dealt with that issue in a way that was sensitive and careful. If you're a person trying to write poetry or verse for the first time, I really would just say don't be afraid. The main problem that people have is thinking they have to use this poetic voice in order to be able to write. And you just have to be honest in your writing. That's all that really matters. And then once you've done that, once you've got the honesty on the page, it doesn't mean you've got to spill your guts, but just write something that is in some way true. Then you can go through the pencil or a pen and you can cut out any words that you don't need. You can get rid of all those ands, buts, thens, and condense it as much as is possible. Is there a way that if you have a line that's 10 words, can you make it 6 words? Is there a way that you could add a little bit of rhyme or half rhyme in order to give it a little bit more melody? Listen to the poetry when it's read aloud. Does it sound melodic? Does it sound like it has music in it? If it doesn't, you can add words, take words out, use a little bit of alliteration maybe to get the sing-song going. But the main thing is don't be afraid, and don't think it needs to sound like anything in particular. It just needs to sound like you. For me, the challenges of writing in verse are that I wake up some days and I don't have any melody in me whatsoever. So I will take the dog for a walk. I might go for a run. I try in that way to get my body to feel some kind of a rhythm. But if that doesn't work, I read lots and lots of poetry. So Seamus Heaney would probably be my go-to, closely followed by Kate Tempest. So I will listen to lots of poetry and read a lot of poetry in order to see if I can get some of that musicality into my own brain. I can't really push it when it comes to verse. If I'm writing in prose, which is like normal story writing, I can definitely get 1,000 words written in a day. But with poetry, it's very, very difficult, and I might only get 7 words written, or I might get 700 or none. So I have to just wait and see what the universe provides, and sometimes it provides very little, and that can be quite frustrating. Whether or not I write in verse is always the question that I'm asking myself when I start a book. Toffee was probably easier than any other book when it came to making the decision about what form it would take, because the very first poem I wrote included these ideas about who Toffee was, that she was a girl who was hard and sweet, with a name that you could chew on, and a girl who could break teeth, all of that. I can't remember it word for word. But I knew immediately that this was a verse novel, and that's in real contrast to something like Moonrise, which I had no idea how to write for 2 years. I went back and forth and back and forth. But there was something about writing about dementia that meant that the white space was where Marla was trying to remember, perhaps, trying to gather memory or simply have quiet thought. And then the white space for Toffee, I suppose, is where she's trying to forget. So this book wasn't really a problem for me in terms of making a decision about how it would be written. I loved writing this verse. I didn't struggle with it like I have done with so many of my other books. It was really quite pleasurable to write, actually, which I hate to say, because I always want to say it's really difficult and hard and horrible, but it wasn't. I enjoyed writing this book very, very much, and especially because it was in verse. When people ask me questions about the book, one of the first things they ask is, why did you write a book about dementia? And I really don't feel like this is a book about dementia. The main theme for me is friendship. This is a book about the way that we should treat one another and what love looks like. So Toffee and Marla don't seem like they should be friends at all. Marla is a much older woman. Toffee is a troubled teenager. And what could they possibly have in common? But it's because they very quietly and gradually start to develop respect for one another and a kind of healthy dependency on one another that this friendship grows. And they end up being friends and equals, and that was really important to me as well. There seems to be this sweet spot in life where people listen to you and respect you. I don't know what age, maybe from 26 or 28 or something up until you're maybe in your late 60s. And then either ends of that, nobody really wants to know what you have to say. And I wanted to show that that's not true, that everybody has something important to say, and that everyone ultimately is looking for love and belonging, and these two people find it in one another. So their friendship for me is the most important thing in this book. My very favourite poem in the book is a poem called Forever, and I love it because I think it's simply a love poem, and it can be about friendship or it can be about romantic love, and I'll read it for you now. Forever. No goodbye is forever unless you can erase everything you ever knew about a person and everything you once felt. I left Dad a few months ago and decided that was it. I was drawing a line under knowing him. But sometimes I wake with his voice in my ears and his maybe love in my guts, and I remember everything good about him which has been left behind and forget the bad, and it makes me so sad. I wish I had the courage to call him and beg for him to be better. Mum has been dead my whole life, and not a day goes by when I don't think about how we would have been together, all the spaces left empty where she would have stood. No goodbyes forever, unless you can erase everything you ever knew about a person and everything you once felt. The person who I would say is my favourite poet changes on a daily basis. It always just depends on how I'm feeling. But I suppose for the last couple of years, Kate Tempest is the poet who I've connected most to. I have seen her now perform live 3 times, and she's absolutely incredible. I come away from her concerts or performances, whatever you want to call them, completely alive and completely devastated, and totally ready to write and to be an artist if I can be. I find her inspirational and true. And yeah, at the moment, today, Kate Tempest is my favourite poet. My writing process is quite regimented, actually. Because I have a child, I have to write at particular times of the day, and I usually write when she's at school. So I tend to do school hours. I get up, I make breakfast, I do the school run, I come back, I do all my chores, I sit down on my desk, I write for as long as I can, and then I get up and I start to make the dinner, and then I go and I do the school run again. And my process is simply to sit at my desk and be really strict with myself about that. As I said, if I feel that the writing isn't coming and I'm writing in verse, I'll go for a walk, take my dog for a walk, or I'll go for a run myself. And that sometimes helps to get the creative juices flowing. But you can't really write, I don't think, if you're just sort of thinking about writing. Writing is a physical process. You have to sit and be prepared to spend some time doing it. It doesn't just come, and certainly whatever you read in a book or you hear performed will not be the first thing that has come into the person's head. There's a lot of editing goes on, and I'd say that actually the most important button on my keypad, on my keyboard, is the delete button. I delete way more than I keep. So perhaps, if you see a book of mine and it's about that thick, in reality, I've probably written about that much, actually. And it gets cut down, either during the writing process itself or when the editor becomes involved. So be really strict with yourself and don't accept anything less than what you know is your very best.